In the 1880s, a significant wave of Italian immigrants began arriving in the United States, driven by economic hardship and political instability in Italy. Exploited as cheap labor in the cities and surrounding mining and industrial towns, they were often housed in squalid conditions. Alessandro Mastro Valerio, a Chicago newspaper editor, offered them a way out through another migration, this time within the States. The creation of an Italian agricultural colony was the noble experiment.
Oh, well, yes. I think there were about 30 that came by the advertisements. And of course, some of them stayed and some of them didn't stay. They all came and bought a piece of land and trying to make a living out of it. They were really pioneers in a perfect sense of the word. Actually, what kind of put an end to it was World War I. They drafted so many of those sons out of that colony into the military that when they came back, they were part of the United States society, in a sense. They were no longer isolated to an Italian colony.
When Valerio found the area, saw the area, and fell in love with it, and was able to acquire some land here, that is when he advertised in his newspapers in Chicago area and a couple other the larger cities to invite the Italians to come south to Daphne. But that allowed them to finally do what they knew, rather than having to work the menial jobs. He felt sorry for him. He was an Italian immigrant himself, but he was well established. And so that way they could come to this area and do what they knew, be it tailors or merchants or farmers. That's my grandfather in the back behind the bar. It was a gas station and whatnot at the time. That picture was actually taken right before the end of Prohibition. We were able to zoom in on the calendar, and I forget the year, it's up there, 33. That was before the end of Prohibition, but doing research towards the end of that year, the government allowed beer and wine under a certain alcohol content, and so that's when he changed the gas station, service station, into serving also alcohol.
Ben Angelo Tryon worked at Tryon's store beginning when he was 9 or 10 years old until the store closed in 1984. With skills learned there, he opened first Ben Tryon's Meat Market at the same location and later Tryon's in nearby Bell Forest.
My grandfather is Angelo Tryon, and he moved to Daphne and married Alvira Mancy. And Alvira Mancy had already started running a grocery store. Her first grocery store was below the hill. When I say below the hill, it was down by Mayday. And the reason everything was on the below the hill was because the bay boats run back and forth. Tryon's store was a mainstay in Daphne. It was a bus depot. All of us kids knew how to make out bus tickets. It was the fire phone. It was the phone you called when there was a fire. And then you headed out the back. The fire phone was also at my aunt, Uncle Red and Aunt Teeny's in the house on the corner. They had the fire phone in the house. When the fire phone rang, Teeny answered the fire phone, told Uncle Red, told him where it was while he was putting his pants on, jumped up, run across the street, wrote it on the blackboard, and hit the siren. We had a siren on that water tower that's still there today. Was the only way that anybody know there was a fire. They were all completely entwined with Daphne, Baldwin County, and the Catholic Church, and this whole area. I used to hear my grandma speak Italian on Saturday mornings. They would go in the warehouse, her and Miss Garisco, and would talk Italian. And I asked her one day, I was probably 10 years old. I said, why do y'all never speak Italian out here? She said, we're Americans. She said, your grandpa told us that we could not speak Italian, that we were going to be Americans.
Another storied presence besides Trion's and Bertinelli's stores in downtown Daphne is Mancy's Antique Club. That began when it was transformed from a produce warehouse to a filling station in 1924. In it, consummate collector Frank Mancy, also known as Buster, housed his world-class collection of Jim Beam decanters, along with other artifacts of a bygone era. He and his wife Tootsie also lived in the back of the store for many years.
This is Frank Mancy as a very young man, and again he has on his hat. He loves this hat. And here is Carmela that he married in Michigan and moved down to Daphne, and they had 6 children. This is Tootsie when she's courting my father, and this is my father. This is a candid photograph that the photographers would take of you on the street corner as you were walking by, so that's totally candid, and that's exactly how he looks. Here's the plow. There are not many pictures of the farming activities. My father would hire a professional photographer to come down and document important parts of our lives. This is Mr. Corte. I think it's A.I. Corte, but I'm not, I would have to double check that. You could see them walking up the hill from the beach up to the top of the hill, and they would be talking, and they would come across a topic that was really important to them, and they would stop, and the hands would be going, and they would be talking, and then they would agree on something, I don't know, and then they would continue up the hill.
When the Cortes and Mancys divided up their farmland, they used Highway 181 to split it in half. No one bothered to measure the exact footage of each parcel. Then they tossed a coin to decide who took the east or west parcel. Finally, they had 1 cow between them, so they tossed the coin again to decide ownership.
About 15 years ago, there was a project in downtown Daphne to create some local murals. I was asked to create an image. The Italian families were the theme that I picked, the founders, and I selected this wall out of the available places because across the street from here is the original small downtown urban center that was Daphne in 1927. There was the bank that my great-great-grandfather Cipriano was instrumental in creating, and then there was Trion's store, which was the market, the grocery, and then there was Mancy's, which was the bar. So across the street, those 3 entities were really what constituted, downtown Daphne. I've heard stories of them coming in from Bell Forest on Saturdays to bring food from the market. Part of the composition is, having the wagon that sort of replicates the idea that they came into town with their goods. Also in the composition, I included the potato sheds is what they're sort of referred to, but they were the working sheds that were on the farms where produce would be brought in and sorted and then sent out for sale. And the background was taken from Tuscan style architectures with the bell tower and the materials, the tones of the earth tones that are used in the mortar work, which is similar to the existing church, Christ the King, down the street now. That was also, mine and the other families built that church and established that parish.
The colonists organized as trustees of the Catholic Church, purchased land, and donated their time and ability to erect the Italian Catholic Church of the Assumption, a small wooden structure at the corner of College and 6th. In 1898, Queen Margherita of Italy, House of Savoy, sent as a gift to this church a set of vestments, a missal, and other artifacts to commemorate its establishment. They are on display in the vestibule of today's Christ the King Church. The first priest in the new parish was the beloved Father Angelo Ciaraglione, who was a Scalabrini priest, an order of Italian priests who came to the New World to minister to Italian immigrants. He was known as the priest of the flying missions. Padre Angelo lived at the Constantine Bertinelli home and used a small chapel there before the church was built. The Italians created the Catholic cemetery in Bell Forest in 1914. Angelo's remains were later reverently removed from the original church to a vault there built by Agostino Guaresco.
The 3 Russell brothers married 3 Pedazzer sisters. The reason there's no Pedazzer family name now is because on the Pedazzer side, the 6 children, there was 1 son named Ralph Pedazzer and 5 sisters. And Ralph Pedazzer, when he was 18, was with my grandmother, who he's very close to, his sister, and my great aunt, and they were down on the beach by the American Legion in Fairhope, where the young folks would come on the bay near here, but often they'd go to Fairhope just for something different. And they were swimming on the beach with a bunch of other teenagers when 2 men fired into, one held a rifle and fired in and killed my great uncle, Ralph Pedazzer. He was age 18 in 1924. In the Bell Forest Cemetery on County Road 64, I have over 100 relatives buried there, and 2 sets of great-grandparents buried there, and 2 sets of grandparents buried there.
Father Fred Boney grew up at Christ the King Parish and School. He attended McGill-Tulane and then Spring Hill College and was on the cusp of entering medical school when he felt called to enter the seminary. Today he is pastor at St. Catherine of Siena in Mobile, Alabama.
The patriarch of the Boney family, his name was Luigi, and he came from Trentino, from Trent, that area. Then I think at that time it was Austria, but under the Austrian rule. But he left there, went to Prussia, worked in mines there, and then came to the United States. So the Philippines, the Marcos, they came from Piedmont, so that area around Turin. Trentino, it's an autonomous region, so Trentino Alto Adige or Trentino Sul Tirol. You have the southern province, which is the province of Trent, and that's, we'd say Italian. And then the northern province is the province of Bolzano, and that's more German speaking.
My grandpa came here from Chicago. He worked in a coal mine, and there was just a narrow space to go through, and a lot of the other men were afraid to go in this small area. So Grandpa went through the tunnel on his stomach and kept digging and digging, and he found this coal vein, and he was awarded lots of money for that. So he came to Belfast on the advice of a friend, Mr. Lazare.
They said that one of the reasons that Grandpa came here was because the mafia was taking over so much of Italy that even if you didn't want to join, they would force you to. So he was escaping from that because his brother, I found that out too, his brother was in the mafia, and he didn't want to be involved in any of that. And all of the Italians in this area they helped each other. If one farmer needed some help, the other one helped him do it until he got his crops in, and then the other one would help the other one till he got his crops in. And it was just a brotherhood.
you have to remember this area was settled like in the 1800s. So there were structures where they could live, but until they could get something built, crudely maybe, so they could get it built and live in it. But like Millie said, Mr. Pinarelli came and he helped get a lot of the Italians started and in the area, and so they owed a lot to him.
My sister weighed a lot, and she wanted to ride on the raft, and she got on the raft, and they turned the raft over in the pond and got her all wet, and they couldn't take her back home because Mother would be really mad. And so they had a little house that they built by the chicken pen tree, and they took her up there to dry her out before they took her home. When we had floods, the water was everywhere. And so they had this little raft that they went across, and they picked the tomatoes or the onions or whatever they had over there before they could bring it back and for Mother to cook.
To me, we are truly blessed to have grown up with our Italian heritage, because to me it taught me to be a hard worker, have a good work ethic, and to be positive.
Every family has skeletons in their closets. My grandfather, Michael Berga, was probably not an easy Italian to live with. And Maria died. And when the coroner came and got her, and they were going to take her to whatever funeral home there was, the police showed up because they said she had suspicious bruising on her body. Well, they arrested grandfather Michael and took him and put him in jail in Bay Minette. Well, the damage had already been done, so again, Aunt Helen and Aunt Teresa Berga went up there and said no, she had just been real dizzy lately and she was falling down. So they released him to them and to my father, who drove him up there. And my father said after that, he just could not speak to his father again. At this time in history, the man was the patriarch. He was the law of the family. My husband, Sam, came from a different culture in Mobile, and he began farming with my mother and I, because my father had died when I was 15. And Mother and I kept farming because we had no other way to make a living. One day, Sam came in and he said, that Joe Lasry and I, we just got out in that field and he wouldn't listen to me and I wouldn't listen to him, and we dog cussed each other. And I'm like, okay. The next weekend, we went over to Fred Boney's and they were having a fish fry. And so we're over there, and here comes Joe. Hey, Sam, how you doing? Did you fix the problem with the tractor? Da, da, da. And we got in the truck going home, and Sam said, now let me ask you something. We just dog cussed each other in the field last week, and now we're best friends again. I said, honey, it's all over. That's the Italians. We'd get it out in the open. We're done with it. I tell people, when you move here, don't cuss anybody at a light, because you're going to either be going to church with them, you're going to be friends with them, kids are going to be in school with them. We all get along because there's so much relationships between the families. Our marrying from one Italian family to the other, and then some, from other areas, it's kind of like kudzu. It just goes all over the place.
So I was fortunate that actually was farming on both sides of the family, and both sides of my family are very Italian. My grandmother was a Lasry, and She and my grandfather had a little hardware store in Bell Forest, but they also had a working farm just to feed their family. I got to meet a lot of those old farmers, and they were always telling stories, and the women usually were very loud, and you could tell in charge, but lunch was kind of their time just to hang out, and then they'd go back to the field for the afternoon. My mom's family, much bigger. She had, I think, and my dad, first cousins too. Having 30 or 40 first cousins was absolutely normal. I don't even know most of my relatives.
I'm the third generation of the Lazarys of this family, of my family. We wasn't not necessarily looked down on, but people around the area where we were raised here in Bell Forest were not all that happy about us coming in and being Italian and all. They thought we would take over the place, I guess, or whatever. But it wasn't long for we were mixed and mingled and got along very well. We were raised on polenta. That's where we ate our cornmeal was there. We all sat down around the table and ate at the same time. And after we got through eating, before we cleaned up too much, we'd all kneel down and we would say the rosary.
The Corte Farms is one of the oldest and most respected names in Alabama agriculture. It is also one of the longest continually run operations in the state. A poem that hung in an old horse barn with the last line, "Keep the land and the land will keep you," sums up the Corte philosophy.
Our granddad, Albert and I's granddaddy, came to this country in the late 1800s.
First question that comes up is, why did he leave Italy? He was from a family that had 4 boys, and as you know, in Italy, if you aren't the number 1 son, you're entitled to zip. This land and stuff that you see was developed with mules and axes and shovels and a lot of hard work. Giulio, one of the original uncles, would harness 30 pair of mules in the morning before the help got there to go clear the land with an axe and a shovel.
They all worked together. Farms here in Bell Forest, we had a farm in Loxley, we had a farm in Foley, and packing houses. My grandmother was a Bertola, and her family kind of followed the same footsteps here and had sheds like we did. And as time went on, potatoes turned out to be our biggest vegetable and biggest crop that we had. We shipped potatoes to 48 different states and Canada. He furnished the island of Puerto Rico 95% of the onions and potatoes that the island consumes. We still do some farming, but mainly we've migrated from the farming to be more of a very diversified family now.
The Bertola patriarch, Alessandro, was born in Rumo, Austria, part of the Trentino area. He moved to Michigan in 1889 to work in the iron mines. After marrying and moving to Minnesota, where he found safer work, he received a letter from his sister in Baldwin County.
In 1902, they came to Bell Forest, Alabama. And that was because his sister, Mrs. Magdalena Corte, Mrs. Angelo Corte, had moved down here. So she wrote back to her brother and said, you know, this is a much better place to live. They had moved down here in 1898. And so she said, come on down. The farming's good, the property, you know,
it's cheap.
Cheap, and
like $2 an acre.
This would just be a much better place for you to come and raise your family.
Alessandro's son, Louis George, who was working for Ford Motor Company in Michigan, got the idea of shipping their produce across country.
He observed that they didn't really have any fresh potatoes. And he wrote back to his dad and said, you know what? these people could use with some fresh produce. What do you think about us shipping a boxcar load of potatoes up here? And of course his dad was like, I don't know about that. But he did. And when he did, it was just strictly on a wing and a prayer, but they arrived in perfect condition and said, hey, we've started something.
It evolved over a pretty long period of time. But that was a big part of our family business. Now, back here, I don't know if you can see it, there's a potato sack. And that was our lead brand, starting in probably in the mid-20s, and we used that brand all the way through the early 80s when we decided to get out of the potato shipping business. Today in Baldwin County, we've got a big influx of developers, a lot of lands going into developments. I've got some going in right now and expect to have some other shortly. So we're farming houses now.
Like many of these families, the DeFilippis and the Marcos came to Baldwin County together as friends, and their descendants remain so.
My father's family immigrated to the United States in 1880, and they moved to the Chicago area, Spring Valley, Illinois, and they were working in the coal mines. And there was a man named Maestro Valerio who advertised in the local Italian language newspapers about property down here and encouraging people to move south. And they decided to do that. So they bought property sight unseen, moved down here in 1894 when my father was 6 months old. And we have been here ever since.
The DeFilippis came down from Chicago. They came over from Italy when he was about 17. That was the grandfather, which was Dominic Antonio. And I think they came down about the same time as the Marcos, as far as I know. And then they married here, and they've raised their children here on Rigsby Road. And then we're still here.
A historic marker has been erected at County Road 64 and Highway 181 to recognize the original families of the Italian colony. Many of their descendants still live in the area.
There were 10 of us children, and I am the last, the baby. And I am, in that respect, I am the last person of the Italian colony survived from the original family. Simply, my father came late, and I was the last child.